Welcome to Get Paid for Your Pad, the definitive show on Airbnb hosting, featuring the best advice on how to maximize profits from your Airbnb listing, as well as real-life experiences from Airbnb hosts all over the world. Welcome. We are your hosts, Josefa Kapadia and Jasper Rivers.
Get paid for your pad. 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 Get paid for your pad.
Hey guys, it's Josefa Kapadia and Jasper Rivers, and we are back with another episode of Get Paid for Your Pad. And today we have Glen Cooley with us. Glen?
Hello.
Hey, how's it going?
I'm very good. How are you guys today?
Great, great. All right, so today we are interviewing Glen, who has been a longtime user and advisor for all sorts of different Airbnb hosts. And we're really happy to have him on the show and share his expertise.
Hey Glenn, this is Jasper here. How are you doing?
I'm very good. I'm very good. It's a nice sunny day in Los Angeles today.
Good, good. Yeah, we're in Vegas. It's pretty hot here as well.
Oh, well, I used to live there, so I lived there before I was in Los Angeles, actually.
So you know what that's about, huh?
Well, yes. Just be glad you're not there in August when it's going to be probably about 118.
Oh my God, that's pretty crazy. Listen, Glenn, just to get started, could you tell us a little bit about how you got started with Airbnb?
Oh, I certainly will. It's I'll say it's the story I love to tell. I got started in Airbnb through it was almost just it was a moment of complete, financial desperation, actually, because I moved to, like I said, to Los Angeles, from Las Vegas, and with a gentleman who was my best friend at one time, and unfortunately, I had to ask him to leave my apartment, and because he wasn't paying rent. And shortly after that, the reason for me being in LA, which was I was a stage manager actually, was coming to an end because my show was closing at the Kodak Theater, and I had to pay the rent. And so I had no idea what I was going to do. And so a friend of mine at the time said, well, you're going to do Airbnb. And I said, I'm going to what? And I said, I don't know what you're talking about. And he was like, he said, you're going to do Airbnb. And I was like, what is that? And he's like, well, it's where people come and they rent your bedroom out. And I was like, and where do I go?
Because you have a house with 2 bedrooms?
Yes, I did at the time. And I do now, and I did at the time also. Okay. And I said, well, where do I go? And he was like, well, I mean, you stay here. And I was like, I said, I will be homeless and destitute after being evicted before I will allow some stranger from the internet to come and sleep in my second bedroom in my $300,000 apartment. And so that was, again, in the fall of 2012. And so, but in October, I did log in to the website, and I got an account and started, poking around. But I was very, very apprehensive about doing it. Mm-hmm. And so I was looking for any excuse not to as I thought of like the final, the last resort would be to go to Airbnb. And so it wasn't until March that I really got serious about it, because in October, I had just been through, the last 3 months were just crazy, and so and I had money in savings and everything, so I was just like, well, I've already paid October's rent, so October was the month that I had to ask my roommate to leave.
You did list the second bedroom in October, or did you wait?
I joined. I waited. I joined. I started the account. So I got an account in October, and then in November I paid the rent and myself, and then in December I scraped it together, and then by January I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do now. I was like, I was just thinking, I think I might actually have to do this Airbnb thing. But I got a girl to stay there in the apartment. It was unfurnished, mind you, at this point. I had no idea what I was getting into. Had no clue. And then by let's see, she was there until the end. She was going to stay until the end of March. So I was covered through then. But then I had no idea what I was going to do after April. And so while she was there, I got the apartment furnished, and because she was just sleeping on an air mattress, and it was completely content with that. It was like a $1,500 a month, closet, and by the beginning of March, when she left, it was furnished, and I had my listing started, and I was doing everything wrong, of course, because for new users on Airbnb, there's a lot more hosting materials. There's a lot more information on the internet now than there used to be, and this was 2 years ago. There was very little information on there. Even on Airbnb, there was very little on there about what you're supposed to do and what exactly it is that people were looking for, because I did not come at it from a guest standpoint. I had never stayed as a guest, and then of course when I was looking to be a host, I couldn't afford to stay with anybody else as a guest, so I was just kind of going at it completely blind. Okay. And by the middle of April, I got my first guest. I'm sorry. By the middle of April, I got my first guest, and then it's been pretty solid since then, actually.
So what I wanted to do now is, so we sort of got the intros and as how you got into it. What I'd love to know next is, okay, so a lot of people that we speak to, they're always concerned, just like you had the concerns. You didn't want to get into it. You thought it was crazy to have strangers stay with you. All right, so what were your biggest fears or worries as you were going into this type of business, and did any of those actually come to pass?
Okay. So I had huge apprehensions about doing this. They were mostly based on unfamiliarity with what it actually was that I was doing, because I sort of equated it, the Airbnb, to like running a hotel out of my second bedroom, and I actually, when I was in Vegas, I worked at a hotel. Or not I worked in a hotel, but not for the hotel. And those were the type of people that I thought I was going to end up getting in my apartment. And it was that's not the way it worked out.
Were you worried that guests would damage your property, or they would steal something, or what was your main concern?
My main concern was damage. I said, when I was told about Airbnb, and I said, I have an apartment full of very nice things, and I am not about to, let, because like I said, I was working. I worked actually for Cirque du Soleil in Vegas, and for the first part of when I was living in LA, and so we saw the type of people that that you can get in some of the hotels in Vegas, and just like you're probably seeing there now, they can get pretty rowdy. And I just didn't want to have, I wasn't running a fraternity house, right. And so that was really the first thing that came to mind. That I don't want my place getting torn up was the main thing. That has not, of course, been anything like what my experience has been. It has absolutely been a fantastic experience. I had one guy early on that was kind of crazy. But that was the only one I ever had, and since then everything has been fantastic.
That's awesome. You know, of all the people that we've interviewed, I don't think we've actually heard a single nightmare story. Everybody always goes in with this they go in with the apprehension and they go in with the worry. But they've pretty much had awesome experiences. So it's been really cool.
Yeah.
That's great that you're sort of on the same page. We love hearing that.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, and I know a lot of hosts. You know, I have a lot to do with the groups platform on Airbnb's website, and so I know a lot of hosts in West Hollywood, in particular where I am, and all over LA County, really. And I think you know, I mean, living in LA, you're going to run into some crazy people, you know, I mean, because, you know, this is where the crazy people come. So, and lots of them stay in LA.
That's why I moved to LA. So,
well, I absolutely love it here. So I guess I have lived in, oh gosh, I've lived in so many different places, and LA is really my favorite. So I'm at home with the crazy people.
So you were saying that the worries that you had initially didn't really materialize. Now, can you give us some of your best experiences?
Absolutely. One of them in particular is a guy named George, and he was coming from South Africa. He lives in Cape Town, and he and his wife were coming right after they got married. It was actually part of their honeymoon, and I thought, why in the world are they coming to stay in some guy's second bedroom, you know, on their honeymoon? And then I got to know who he was, and he owns a telecom company in Cape Town, South Africa. He could probably afford to stay anywhere he wanted to stay in all of Los Angeles.
You must have felt privileged that he chose you.
Well, yeah, and I thought, and finally, you know, because I got to know him, because you know they came in and they were not a whole, you know, sometimes you have guests that want to know absolutely every detail about your place and what's going on, and they're just looking for any kind of information that they can get. And other people really won't ask that many questions at all. When I got George as a guest, it was him and his wife. And when they got in, you know, we just had a few conversations, and I made some recommendations, and then we got to be really, really good friends. We, you know, a couple of nights, and this was actually right when I was about to start sort of really like, you know, I had my business partner at the time, and we were looking for additional listings, and, you know, he was at my place for about 4 nights, and I think 2 nights he and I were staying up until about 2 o'clock in the morning, because once he found out that, you know, that I was, you know, sort of an entrepreneur and I was going into wanted to, you know, start my own business, he loved that, and he was all over it, and he, you know, I just really, I mean, that, you know, that's something that, you know, you can't buy that type of like mentorship, really.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And he and I still keep in touch. And finally, we were actually the second time we went out to dinner. I just, you know, I was with him. I was like, why did you guys, like, why are you here? I was like, you can stay anywhere you want. And he's like, well, yeah, I know. He was like, but it's like, this is the experience that we want. We wanted a completely immersive experience, and we wanted to live with someone who knew where to go and knew what to do. And that's really why we picked your place. We read your reviews, and everyone was talking, you know, said, you know, how nice you were and friendly, and you know, it's like, so you know, this is we wanted to stay here.
See, Glenn, what you just touched on is such a critical central piece to traveling. All right, so I just had lunch with my aunt and uncle yesterday, and they literally brought this exact same sentiment up. Essentially, whenever you go to a new place or new city, the best way to travel and experience that city is with the guidance of a local, whether it's a friend or an associate or a work colleague, and Airbnb provides that access even if you don't know anybody in that city, and that's why it's such a special thing. You can get that insight, you can get that really local immersive experience, and you can usually save money, so it's an all-around win-win. It's really incredible.
I absolutely agree. It's that is in fact, that's not, not only is it something that differs or makes Airbnb different from staying in a hotel versus staying with someone on Airbnb. Not only is Airbnb different than it's not just a hotel alternative. It's also a really interesting alternative to the vacation rental space, because and I mean, like, the HomeAway website and VRBO, it's very much different than those, because when you're renting one of those places, you're very much getting a piece of real estate. They don't really understand the concept of being a host. A lot of them don't they don't really even know who the people are that come in to stay at their places, because they have a property management company dealing with it, and they're really the owner. It's like it's very separate. It's very hands off as far as the actual property owner, at one time I was on those websites in addition to Airbnb, and it just really wasn't the same experience at all. And the interesting thing about it was when I did have guests come in from the other websites, they often, a few of them that had stayed with other people on the HomeAways and the VRBO websites, they commented at how much different the experience was when they stayed at my place, and I wasn't even there. I mean, when I was at my previous residence, I was renting out, or had on Airbnb, I had my second bedroom, but after that, I had multiple listings, and I didn't have anyone there. In other words, I mean, I was I had my apartment, and I had had an entire place listed, and so it was. And of course, that was way different than having a private room, and I really wasn't even prepared for that when I got into it. But I've, even without me being at the listing, the guests that stayed with me from HomeAway and VRBO noted how much different it was, because they felt so much more welcome in the in my place and than they had before.
That's awesome to hear. And of course, in our book, Get Paid for Your Pad, we have looked into some of the other platforms, and for precisely the reasons that you've mentioned, we absolutely recommend Airbnb. So let me ask you this, Glenn. How has it changed your life?
Oh, I mean, it's actually made me. It's really given me so many more opportunities that I never would have even. That I never even realized that it would be possible. I often say, it's restored my faith in humanity, and because it really has, especially because I went into it with such apprehension and such. I was almost determined to make it not work, and even in spite of that, it did work on its own. And I always wanted to own a business, but I never really could. I could never really figure out what I wanted to do. I don't have a business degree. I worked in theater for 15 years as a stage manager. I really, which I was happy to do, but it still wasn't. It was still different than being an entrepreneur, and that was something that I had always really wanted to do, but I really couldn't figure out how to do that. And Airbnb has provided that for me.
That's awesome.
Well, that's great to hear, Glenn. And you mentioned earlier that you managed a few listings where you weren't staying yourself, and I'm just curious, like, how did you manage the check-in process when you weren't there?
Well, I am a huge fan of self check-in. I did a lot of research because I'm a big computer geek, and giving me the opportunity to research some new piece of technology on the internet. I'll spend weeks looking something up. But I found a really good lock that I like to use, and it's proven to be quite useful. But that way, because I did at one time do the face-to-face check-in, and when I'm able to do that, I really do prefer it. Because I do think it gives you a much more personal experience. But I also have a life, and I don't want to sit around and wait on a guest all afternoon.
Right. And this lock that you were using, was that like did you use a lock with a code or a remote control?
I did.
Or
I do.
How does that work?
It works both ways. There are a few different choices. There's the one that I initially wanted to use long before I even was in a position where I even needed to do a self check-in, was Lockatron, but it was actually on Shark Tank, which is one of my favorite shows to watch, the Lockatron, they seem to be having trouble in the production phase of getting all of them out, and so I never really got a chance to. I've never actually used one, but there's another one that's rather expensive called Resort Lock, and that's the one that most of the vacation rental properties use, and then I actually use a Schlage lock.
Okay,
that's much cheaper. That's really actually much cheaper, and it is reliable. I mean, it's Schlage, so it's a major. Probably I think they're probably the biggest lock company in the world, probably. But
right.
But it is. It hooks up to the internet, and it's actually they have an entire line of electronic gadgets that hook into this new up and coming home automation thing.
Yeah, I definitely think these type of locks are the way to go in the future. I actually tried to install one on my door, but my house is about 100 years old, and I'm going to have to make some adjustments before I can use it. But it's definitely a really good alternative to to just handing over the keys and stuff, because people will lose it and all sorts of complications. So I think that's definitely the way to go.
And you should. There's another lock called I think it's called Austin. It's no. I'm sorry. I'll have to think about. I'll think of what it is later. There's another lock that basically it works for older houses, and I'll have to look it up and see what the lock is called, but it works for. It's much more applicable to an older house.
Right. Yeah, and we'll add these all these locks to the show notes, so the listeners can all look this up later on our show notes.
Great. Yeah. But I also with the there's a stronger sense of security that you also get with the coded locks, because not only does it work for if for getting someone in, it's like you said, you're not handing over the keys to your place. And so what I managed to do, because I'm in an apartment, is they get an exterior door key, and then but they're able to call a code that rings a number that if I don't answer, it goes to an answering service that would automatically answer it, and then they'll know who it is, and then they can buzz them in. And then once they get in, they have the code from me that they can use to unlock the door. And the nice thing about it is the codes only last for a certain period of time, and you can even pull an audit on it and see every time someone came in using which individual code. So if there's ever anything that goes wrong, I have the cleaning company that I use has a separate set of they have a separate code that they use. I have one, and I can be horrible with keys, and so I've locked myself before I got these locks. I locked myself out like 2 or 3 times just because I would, run out the door, and and the door would lock behind me, and I would be stuck outside again, and so I had to go, find the key, and so I can't imagine having to be on vacation or whatever, and then trying to keep up with somebody else's keys, and so I like I said, I'm a really big fan of the locks, and and when they're gone, you don't have to worry about did someone go and make a copy of your keys or whatever.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's awesome. Glen, you have given us a ton of really, really helpful tidbits, and we know you have amazing experience. So before we wrap up the show, we'd love to have you give our listeners your one best piece of advice about renting on Airbnb. So if you could condense everything, give what would be your top piece of advice you could give to anybody who's either in the market or thinking about getting into the market.
Okay, well, for those that are getting into the market, I would say that you should be. I have really found that people are way more trustworthy than you realize, and so I would say be trustworthy but cautious. Especially if you're going to list a private room or a shared space, you do need to be cautious, because every now and then you'll hear of a story of someone getting taken advantage of or something, financially or otherwise. Of course, if you rent the whole place, especially on Airbnb, you don't really need to be worried about much, because they've paid in advance before they even get there, so it's not like they're not gonna pay. I mean, it's obvious. There can be a concern about damage, but you're pretty much protected. And then, actually, for hosts, I would say don't buy cheap sheets ever.
Interesting. Okay, don't buy cheap sheets. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Certainly. The one thing that everyone looks forward to when they stay in a hotel room or anywhere else but at home is, what is the bed going to be like? And that is, I have written extensively about, that can be a make it or break it aspect of your listing, because people will put up with a lot of stuff, but they will not put up with not getting a good night's sleep. And if you have a cheap mattress and cheap sheets, it will end up biting you.
Right. It's interesting that you mentioned this, because we've actually written about this in our book, where we also advise people not to economize on the mattress or blankets or sheets and pillows and stuff, because you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
And a good night of sleep is so important.
Oh, exactly. Well, and people are on vacation, and we know one thing that people do when they're on vacation. And the last place you want to be when you're doing that type of thing is in a cheap bed with cheap sheets. It's just a reality. It's just a fact of the matter. You cannot have cheap sheets, and I would never. I'm also not saying you have to go out and buy, the sheets are like $300 a piece either. But 300 thread count sheets are, I think, the way to go. They hold up the longest, and they're not exorbitantly expensive, and even the ones from Target. I have tons of them, and the 300 thread count sheets from Target are not very expensive, and people ask me. In hindsight, they're like, where did you get them? Where did you get these sheets? And I'm like, well, I get them at Target.
Okay. Well, awesome, Glen. Thank you. That was great advice. Thank you so much, and we really appreciate you having you on the show. And remember,
All of our show notes can be found at www.getpaidforyourpad.com/podcast. That's getpaidforyourpad.com/podcast.
So Glenn, thank you so much for this interview. It's been really helpful, and you're obviously a very experienced host, and you have a lot of good advice for people who are hosting on Airbnb. So if people want to get in touch with you, what would be the best way?
Well, you can contact me through my website, which is airbnbhost.com, or you can, if you are already on Airbnb as a host, I can be reached through the new hosts forum, which I'll give you a link for that afterwards.
Okay, great. We'll put that in the show notes so all the listeners can find that. Great, Glenn. Thank you so much.
To learn all the tricks and secrets and tips on how to effectively host on Airbnb, you can download the first 3 chapters of our book for free at www.getpaidforyourpad.com. And the name of our book, of course, is Get Paid for Your Pad.
Get paid for your pad. Get paid for your pad. Get paid for your pad. Get paid for your pad. Get paid for your pad. Get paid for your pad.